Alright, welcome back. We are in our second video of putting together a level 2. In the last video, we set up our level 2, and hopefully you use this as a guide or made your own design. That is also okay. The main thing we need is a section that has something similar to this kind of setup. The idea is we have a path for the player to get up here to get the diamond to win the level is blocked by these spikes. So they have to figure out how to get rid of the spikes, and we do that by traveling over these spikes, hitting this button which makes the spikes disappear, and then our path will be clear and we can continue on through the level. So as long as you have something set up similar to that type of idea, because that is how this particular element of the game works. So we have a few different things to set up in this video. I'm going to jump right into it. If we go over here to our project panel and go to wherever you have your button object located, I'm going to double click on our OBJ button. That'll open it up in our animations editor. What I want this to be able to do is look like this when the button is ready, and then I want it to look like it's pushed in whenever the player pushes it in. Come down here on this one frame that we have, right click and duplicate, and make sure this second frame is highlighted, and we can take our selection tool and select all of the red part, and I'm just going to click and drag that part in. I'm going to leave, let's say, 2 pixel spaces open. So something like that. And then you can click out of it. So now we should have 2 frames, button ready and button pushed. Ready, pushed, ready, pushed. Exit out of that. Let's go down here to our OBJ spike that we imported and set up last video, and double click on it to open it. So what I want this to do, I'm just going to show you real quick what I want it to look like. Whenever the button is pushed, I want this spike to animate as it's just like sinking into the floor. I'm just going to duplicate this, just like we did with the button. And then I'll duplicate it again and one more time. So you should have 4 frames. And right now they all look exactly the same. Up here in our grid, I'm going to drop that arrow down and go to configure grid, and right now it's set to 1 by 1, and I'm actually going to turn it on so we can see what that looks like. If we configure it, this is a 32 by 32, so I'm going to cut that into fourths and say 8 by 8. We have 4 equal sections going up and down and the same going left and right. So this is our first frame. It's going to be all the way up. And now let's go to our second frame. And I'm going to draw a selection box over the entire image. And I'm going to bring this very top part of this spike all the way down to this second section. So drag it down, lined up on either side. And then I'll click out. That'll set it. Then let's go to the third frame. Do the same thing. Draw an outline around the whole thing. And this time we're going to drag it down to the third section, and then in our fourth frame, same thing, and you guessed it, all the way down to that last section. So if we come over here, and I'll leave it at a speed of 5, and I'm just going to right click and preview this. Maybe a little faster, let's say 10. See how that works. That's not bad. How about 15? That might be too much. No, I kind of like that, because once you press the button, I want those spikes to disappear pretty quick. So I'm going to go with a speed of 15 and make sure that we're not looping. I'm going to make sure that this is highlighted, and I'm going to come down here and I'm going to rename this. And I always like to start my animation names out with ANI. Short for animation, and then an underscore, and I'm going to call this one spike down, and that just says that the animation is the spike going down. With that highlighted, I'm going to right click and duplicate it, And I'm going to take this one that says animation 1, and I'm going to rename it ANI underscore spike up. And then with this one highlighted, I'm just going to highlight that last frame, delete it, that one, delete it, that one, delete it. So the only one we should have is the very first frame that takes up the full size of the sprite. So we have animation spike down and spike up. And I'm actually going to slide spike up to the top. That way, when this object is loaded into a level, it will go to whichever animation is on top first. I'm going to exit out of that. Now we're going to give these some functionality. So for our OBJ spike and OBJ button, I'm going to put these in the object event sheet since they are objects. If we come over to our object event sheet, we have our springboard, the diamond, and the coins, which are all also objects. Let's add an event and go into our sprites, our objects, and find our player. And I am going to use is overlapping another object, and that is going to be our OBJ button. I'm going to go into our level 2 tab and zoom in here. So the whole idea, one, is we want the button, once it's pushed, we want the spikes to disappear. So we need to set that other animation. I also want the other animation we set up for the button to go in, so that second frame where the button looks pushed in. And then I want to keep track of if the button has been pushed or not, because I don't want the player to be able to interact with the button more than once. We could run into issues when it's trying to play animations or sounds that we'll put in a little bit later. So we'll create a variable that lets us know if the button has been pushed or not. So let's go ahead and do that now. In our project panel, get our OBJ button, and if you highlight it, it brings up the properties over here on the left side in the properties panel, and we have instance variables and edit instance variables. I'm going to do that and add a new instance variable. This just means that the variable belongs to the OBJ button object itself. I'm going to just call this variable button pushed, and it's going to be a number, and we'll leave it at 0. This is going to be one of those 0 for false, 1 for true. So let's go back over to our objects event sheet, and I want to check for that variable that we just created. So over here in this space off to the left of our object player, I'm going to double click, and this is going to allow us to add another condition, and we'll go into our sprites, our objects, and grab our OBJ button. And if we scroll down, I want to compare an instance variable, and the button pushed is our variable. I want to know when it is equal to 0, which is false, meaning the button has not been pushed. Hit done. Now we can start adding actions. What happens when these two conditions are met? Let's add an action. In our sprites, objects, grab that button again and scroll down. And the first thing we want to do is set the value of our instance variable. And that's going to be that button pushed, because once we have pushed the button, we want to set it to true, which is, in our case, 1. We've set it to 1. This is no longer true, therefore the player can no longer cause this code to run if it should happen to overlap the button more than once. I'm going to add another action, and I'm going to go back into our sprites, objects, grab that button again. Now we only have 2 animation frames. One is it extended full, which was our button is ready, and the one with the button pushed in. So I'm just going to set the frame to frame number 1, because if you remember, the frames start at 0. So the very first frame is 0, the second frame is 1. And I want to switch this to that second frame, which was the button pushed in. All right, let's take care of those spikes now. Add an action. Let's go into our sprites, our objects, and get our OBJ spike. And we want to set the animation because we broke that up into 2 animations. One was spike up and the other one was spike down. So let's set the animation, and in between quotation marks we want Annie spike down. So hit done. I am going to test a couple of things here. Let's go back over to our level 2 tab, and I'm going to zoom out, and I'm going to make sure our player layer is unlocked, and we should have the player spawner here. If you don't, I believe we kept it in the meta. Just drag a player spawner onto the layout. Make sure you only have one of these existing in a single layout. If you have more than one, a lot of our code is not going to work. So I'm going to drag him up over here somewhere, right next to our button, something like that. And the reason I'm putting him here is so that we can just test this real quick, and we'll see our spikes on the screen when we push the button. Another thing to notice, if you just click on the layout, you'll see the event sheet is set to event sheet level 1, which is all we have right now. If we go to levels under our event sheets, all we have is level 1. I'm going to open that up. We set this function up quite a few videos back, but if we double click to go into it, we see we set up the direction parameter, our time goal, and our coin goal. We're not going to worry about these two yet. Our direction is set to left. That's what we set it for level 1. And if you notice, I want to go straight to the button. So we're already needing to face left for right now. So I'm going to leave that facing left, and I'm going to go ahead and play this. And we already have a problem. I hit our button, and it looked like it animated in, but our spikes are in the ground. And I'm going to refresh that and do it again. Okay, see, our button is actually, the animation has already played. The button is in. I haven't even touched it yet, and it looks like it's pushed in. And I'll let him go back over there, and I'll hit it, and it didn't do anything. That's because both the button and the spike are playing their animations as soon as the game loads. Therefore, in our functions, in our function start level, we have these wait times set up before we even fade in. But the level is already being set up and is loaded in. We just cover it with a black screen to make it look like we're loading, and then we zoom in for added effect. So over here in our level, our spike and our button have animations, and they're just playing through them. So if we go back to our objects event sheet, we need to tell those animations to not play. And we want that to happen as soon as the level is loaded. Add an event, go to our system, and we want our on start of layout event. And I'm going to slide that up above. And while we're here, let's go ahead and right click down here and add a group. And I'm just going to call this button. And I'll take both of these events, slide them into our new group. So in our start of layout event, let's go ahead and add an action. Go into our sprites, our objects, and let's get that OBJ spike. Let's set the animation, because we set the animation to spike down, and it's just playing through all the animations. So if we set the animation to spike up, then it will just play that one animation. And there's only the one frame, so there won't be an animation. Add another action into our sprites, objects, and get our OBJ button. Down here in our animations, we can just pick stop, and that will stop the current animation from playing. Now here's something else that we could run into. Since this button object already exists on the level, it's not being created. It's already in the level because we placed it there. So there could be situations where our button pushed is set to 1 and it never gets set back to 0. So let's go ahead and take care of that to prevent our variable from staying on 1 or true. So sprites, objects, get the button object, scroll down to instance variables, and let's set the value of button push to 0. Let's go into our level 2 and let's try this out again. You can see it's ready, and then I hit it and it went in, and the spikes went down as well. So those all work, but as you notice, our spikes are still sticking out of the ground because they're sitting on the last frame. Now we could just put a blank frame as the last frame, or we could just destroy the spikes altogether, since once we push the button, the spikes don't go back up. Let's go back to our objects, and in our button group here, I'm going to add an event to button. This is a brand new event. We're going to go into our sprites, objects, and get our spike. And in our animations, I'm just going to choose on finished. That means when this object's animation has completed, it has reached the last frame of the animation, then we can run another piece of code. And that animation is going to be spike down. So once our spike down animation has finished, let's add an action, go to sprites, objects, spike, and I'm just going to type in destroy. And that will get rid of the object altogether. Let's go ahead and test that out. Everything looks good, our button's set. I trigger it, the button goes in, and our spikes are gone. I'm going to refresh that, and I'm going to pay attention to the spikes this time. Okay, I can't really see it. Okay, so to test this out, I'm just going to change the location of my player and the button. So I'm just going to put it up against the wall like that, because I can't see the spikes on screen. We haven't set up the logic to get hurt by the spikes yet, so that doesn't matter. This is for testing purposes. Let's preview that. I just want to see the spikes animation. And I like that. I like the animation speed. I thought that 15 might be too fast, but I actually like it. Okay, I'm going to exit out of that. I'm going to put these back where they were, and then back on our objects event sheet, we are going to use, I'll close that up, we're going to use the sound effect button push that we never set up when we did the audio. In our overlapping the button event, let's add an action to that and go into our input folder and get our audio object, and we want to play, and button push is the file, not looping. And for me, I'm going to drop that down to -6. When I edited it, it came out a little loud. I just change the decibel levels around until they sound good to me. And I'm going to slide that up to where it's the second action in this event. Okay, so let's go ahead and try that out with some sound effects. And I missed it. Okay, let's try that again. There we go. So if I go over it again, it does not sound because we changed that variable. I'm going to exit out of that. So this variable has to be 0 for any of this code to take place, and as soon as we hit that button, we change that variable. And that variable does not get changed from 1 until we restart the level, and this onStart of layout event is run. That is the logic of our button push. So now I want to finish creating this level, so we can put together the rest of the elements. So with my collisions layer unlocked, I'm going to get rid of these two. These were just there for making a palette to pick from. And then I will lock that layer, highlight the objects layer, make sure it is unlocked. And I'm going to pull this coin over onto our playing field here. Now I'm going to go through and add some coins throughout the level and try to be a little strategic about some of them. And then after I get done with that, I will kind of go over and explain why some of them are placed where they are. Okay, so I've just added a few to show a little bit about level design, and I'm just going to start from the beginning here. So this is a situation where you have to decide if you really need that coin or not. I'm going to drag our player down here. So this is where we're going to start, and we're going to start going this way. And if you get to this part, the idea is if you jump over the spike and land before you clear the barrel, you're going to hit the yellow and go back the other way. So you're going to have to clear the spike again. You will get that coin, but you have to clear the spike again and go all the way here and then come back and do it again. So the play here is to wait till you're almost to the spike and then jump and you'll land on top of the barrel. So this is really kind of a throwaway coin. But you can kind of trick your players from time to time and make them think, do they really need that coin? Or maybe it's the second or third time they're going through it to try to get a better score. And they might think, well, if I do this, I will sacrifice some time, but I'm pretty confident I can win the rest of the level in the time goal given that we will set up here in a little bit. I forgot to set this part up right here. So I'm going to unlock collisions. I'm just going to grab one of these, control, click, drag out a copy. And then I'm going to make it small like that and kind of put it into place. And then I'm going to click on the layer or the layout and turn my snap to grid off. And I'll zoom in and I'm going to just bring this down just a little bit. And then with the arrow key, I'm going to slide it to the left so it sticks out. That way, if the player runs into the wall, he will turn around and go back the other way. But if he jumps and lands on top, he won't be touching that yellow and you won't have to worry about the player turning around. So I'm going to highlight that yellow again and control click drag out a copy and put one up here as well. So something like that. And then control click drag out one more copy. I'm actually going to turn snapping on to get this set up. And I think that'll do. Turn my snapping back off and highlight it and just hit the right arrow key a couple times so it sticks out from the red wall. This way, if the player happens to come back this way, they have a wall that will turn them around. I'm going to turn my snapping back on. Now, where were we? Okay, here the player is not tall enough to just run into the coin, so I have them jump for the coin. But the thing is that if you wait till you get here to jump, by the time you land, you're going to hit the yellow and turn around. So the idea is to anticipate it, jump early, land, and then jump to clear that. Now here's another thing in this part of the level. I'm going to zoom in here. If you instinctively jump right about here, you're not going to clear all this. You're going to land right here. You're going to hit that and you're going to go back the other way. And I have this set up that way on purpose because the idea here is patience. Over here, you had to anticipate it and jump before you got to the coin. Here, you got to wait till you get right up to the wall, then jump to clear all of that. And then you'll have to jump again to clear the barrel. I got to this point of designing this level this way by designing it, playing it, redesigning it, playing it, moving things just a little bit, playing it some more. I've played through all the levels that I've created hundreds of times each just to get the exact experience that I want the player to go through and create traps and puzzle-like elements to the game. So here we just have a simple, do you have impulse to jump? Well, it's going to get you. Otherwise, you just let the player fall down. And this seems easy enough. However, if you jump too soon, you'll only get these first two and he'll land before he gets that third one because this is not the normal 5 sections high. It's only 4 sections. So the player's going to jump and he's actually going to hit his head on the ceiling and go straight down. So the jump does not last near as long. So you're going to have to wait till you're right up under the coin, then jump. You'll get all 3, but then you have the same situation here. Your jump is not as high and doesn't last as long. So if you jump, say, right here to try to clear the spike like that, it's not going to happen because you're going to hit your head and fall immediately down onto the spike. So it's another situation where timing is important and you have to kind of consider your surroundings. Okay, up here is another little design. I had in mind kind of like some kind of parkour video where If you jump on this spring, you hit the wall, you go the other way, you hit that wall, and it turns you back around this way. And actually, we can change that as well. I'm going to bring this down like that and bring it in one. And we actually don't even need a floor up here because the spikes take care of that. And I'm going to bring this all the way down. And I will just duplicate that and make a small little square there. Okay, so now you hit the spring, you bounce off this wall up to here. It just reminds me of some little wall jumping parkour action. But there is timing involved. If you wait too long, you're going to hit the wall first, turn around, hit that spring, and you're going to end up going back this other way, which wastes time. So again, there's timing involved. Up here, same thing. You're going to have to jump to go over those spikes because if you just let the player fall, he's going to fall on them. In this part, patience versus impulse. If you wait just at the last second to jump, the character will collect the coin and it'll jump and it'll get stalled by the wall for just a fraction of a second, but it'll clear it. And then over here, as long as you're making your jumps, you're going to run into these coins. And the idea here is there's absolutely nothing down here. If you miss one of your jumps, you got a lot of space to cover before you can get back going the other way. Because you can't make this jump from this floor. You have to make it from these barrels. And to be facing the right way, you're going to have to clear the barrels, clear the spike, and either jump down here and hope that the spring just springs you back up, or you're going to fall down and have to go and hit this wall to turn around. And if you make that mistake, you're probably not going to get the time bonus. So another little trap for the players. But the coins are going to be easy. And we'll just jump back this way. We end up over here. And this one I just did to throw the player off. You're jumping up high to collect these coins, and then you don't really know what's coming next. So it just kind of disorients the player just for a second. And then next thing you know, you have spikes to jump over. So up here, I have this set up to make you think quick on your feet. You're going to jump to clear the barrel, and you're going to immediately have to jump again to get up here, because if you fall down here, there's no saving you. You're hitting the spikes. And on your way up, you're going to see these spikes over here. Obviously, you can't clear that area, so it does no good to hit this and turn around. So you're going to jump on the barrel, and you're going to have to learn some timing here. And the timing is, you got to wait till you're on the edge of the barrel to make that next jump. Same thing here. You make it to here, and here's where it gets kind of tricky, because these are 4 spikes, 4 spikes. This is also 4 spikes, but there's no barrel. So if you wait to the edge of this barrel and jump, you're going to hit those spikes. So nothing changes, but it does trick your eyes, because you're jumping from this point of the barrel, this point of the barrel, and then you're going to have to jump from this point of this barrel. And you'll land here, and you'll have to be careful and have patience to jump right before you get to the spikes to clear that, get on the barrel. We get our button pushed, and then you can start worrying about coins, because this coin is over the spikes. Obviously, you're not going to get that and live. But there's a little strategy. You're going to have to wait to jump pretty late to grab that. Then you're going to have to immediately jump again if you want to try to catch that one, just because of where it's placed. And then you'll have to drop down here and then jump again to clear these without getting turned around each time, because each time you hit a wall, you're going to go back the other direction, and you're going to start taking up time that you don't want to lose if you're trying to get a higher score on the level. And then now our spikes are cleared. We can hit this spring, go up here, and as I have this level laid out, we have our diamond right here. I will show you how this level actually turned out when I designed it in my version of the game. I'll show you that a little bit later. So now that we have the level designed how we want it and how it plays out, and we've play tested it, and we know how we want it to play out, let's cover this issue of the time, the coins, and how he's facing. So in our level 1 event sheet, we have this function, and we set it up with these parameters, we know that each level is going to have different values for these parameters. So what I'm going to do is cancel out of that. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to right click on levels and add an event sheet. And I'm just going to type in e_level_2. And we can really just copy what we have here. And that is, we want this event and we also want this include main. So highlight both of those and we can hold Control and press C to copy, and then go over to our level 2 event sheet and just press Control V. So back on our level 2, we can see that we want to face right when we start this level. In our level 1, we start down here facing left. That's why we have this function with this parameter so that we can change this from level to level. So in our level 2 event sheet, we can double click in our function and we can just change the left to say right and hit done. And while I'm here, I'm going to right click and change my colors, my tab color to black and my text color to bright yellow, because nope, that's white. I thought it was yellow. That's the comments that is yellow. There we go. So you know how I like to have my text with high contrast. So let's go back into our level 2, and we have a loop that is going to count our coins in the level, but I'm just going to go ahead and manually count them. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So we're going to have 14 total coins. But I want the player to only have to collect those that are necessary. I want that to be the goal. So out of 14, I know that this one is a throwaway one, so I'm not going to count that one. But you can definitely get that one and these 3 and this one, so that'll be 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Those are all easy. And then these are also obtainable. So that's really 13 if you play the level basically with perfection, meaning you don't miss any jumps, you don't accidentally fall, you don't hit a wall and go back a direction that you didn't want to go. So even though we have 14 coins, we know that 13 are attainable. So I'm going to make it slightly easier and just say 12. So in our level 2 event sheet, I'm going to double click and I'm going to go into the coins and I'm going to make mine 12. So what we have left is the time. And the way I usually do this is I just play the level. So I'm going to play the level, and if I get through it perfectly, then I'm going to know what the minimum amount of time is. Uh-oh. And right away, we have a problem. And I know what it is. Our level 2, if we click on the layout, remember I said we were working from event sheet level 1. That's because that's the only one we had, and all of our levels have that event sheet hooked up to it. So with our level 2 selected and showing, let's just go in and change it to level 2. So I'm going to play that again. And now he's facing right. Okay, I'm going to play through this. Okay, so by playtesting, I figured something out. And that is, this is too high of a jump for this spring. I'm going to unlock my tile map bricks, select it, and I'm going to get my eraser and erase this area. And then fill it back in where it needs to go, which is going to be one more level down. And then make sure we get our background filled back in there. We can lock that and then move our collisions back down into place. And in fact, I'm going to move this collision back down into place. And This one can be moved. I'm going to turn my snapping off and move this one down. And then I can put snapping back on. I'm going to get my objects tile map, get my spike here, and add one. And then I'm going to get me a barrel, add one in there. I can erase this part. Whoops. Get that barrel placed back in there. Okay. So that should solve that problem. And if anybody's counting, I've only gone through it twice so far, and I failed both times, so I'm going to try it again. So that caused another problem. I'm going to unlock my tile map bricks and select it, get my background and my rectangle tool and draw out a whole section there. And then get my collision here and drop it down. I'm going to lock that. I'm going to make sure that my objects and my collisions are the only two layers unlocked. And I'm going to draw a box around all of these so it selects them. I'm just going to press down on the keyboard twice. That moves all my coins and my collisions down one. Then I'll go to my tile map objects, unlock that, select it, get my eraser here, and I know that I can just erase the top parts of these, then get my pencil, select the barrel, and just get those put into place there. All right, now I can come in here and move these collisions around. Okay, we should be able to make that jump now. So that was 3. I'm going to try a 4th time. Okay, couple things I noticed. One, we didn't set up the logic for the spikes to kill our player. Also, when I collected the diamond, the timer kept counting for about 3 or 4 more ticks. Let's go figure that part out. In our main event sheet, in our time count, we have is playing is equal to 1. So I think over in our objects where our diamond is not set up. Okay, so I think that is our issue here. So let's go ahead and add an action to our diamond group and go into our system, and we want to set the value of is playing to 0. So I'll hit done, and I'm going to drag that up above our set group controls. So it's going to happen pretty quick after we collect the diamond. And when we set is playing to 0, this will not be true and the time will stop. Okay, so the other thing is going to be in our controls in our player death. We know when we collide with our purple collision death object, we can run this code. We want the same thing to happen if we hit one of the spikes, but since the spikes are a different object, we don't have a death collision set up for it. So I'm just going to add to this event. In this blank area, I'm going to double click, and I'm going to go into our sprites, our objects, and I'm going to get our player, and I am going to choose overlapping another object. And the reason I'm not going to use on collision with is because this is a triggered event, and you can only have one triggered event in a block of code. So to avoid having to set up this entire block of code again, I'm just going to use the overlapping another object, which is not a triggered event. So let's add that, and the object is going to be our obj spike. Hit done. And what we want to say here is if it collides with our collision death or the spike, just right click and say make or block. And now you see or. So on collision with collision death or overlapping the spike, then we'll run this code. Okay, with those two changes, I am going to test this out, and I'm actually going to move our player up to test out our collision with the spikes. Well, that's nice. We have an issue with that. Don't know if you caught that or not. Okay, so this will be a fairly easy fix. So what we have to do, this is a triggered event, meaning that it happens once each time this happens. So once it collides with this death object, it triggers all of this. This one is basically saying while the player is overlapping this object, this is going to run. So it's running over and over and over again while the player object is overlapping the spike object. So what we want to do is basically turn this into a triggered event. And we can do that by adding our trigger once while true. But we can't add trigger once while true in the same event block that a triggered event exists, because only one triggered event can be in a block of code. So we're going to have to separate it into more than one block of code. So I'm going to just click anywhere in here to highlight this whole thing, and I'm going to press B on the keyboard, and that gives us a blank sub-event. So now I'm going to highlight every action in this whole block, and I'm going to click and drag it into our sub-event. So now we're saying if either one of these happens, then we move on to this block of code, which runs all these actions. And now we can say we only want all of this to happen one time. So let's just double click in this area over here and go to System and say trigger once while true. Now we have a triggered event here, and then in our sub event we have another triggered event. Okay, I'm going to try that again. And there we go. Problem solved. All right. Okay, I'm going to close that up. I'm going to go into our level 2. One more thing I want to do with these spikes. If we go into our sprites and our objects and open up our spike object, I want to go into our spike down and call up our polygon collision here. And our frame 1 should be just like the one in our other animation, which we set this up when we set the spike up. So in spike down, I want it to cover each frame. So I'm going to just slide each of these down. That way, if the player does happen to move into the area where the spikes are, but it's going down, I don't want it to collide with a part that's not showing. So this is pretty simple, and it's not going to cause the machine or the game to lag because there's not much going on. So simple little fix there. And then the other thing is the time. It looks like about 290 is where I finished. And I know that I kind of made one mistake when I went through that level, but I want to give a little bit more time than perfection, just in case you make one mistake. I'm not going to be that hard on the player. The levels are already designed hard enough in my opinion. So I'm going to change that time goal to 290. Back on our level 2 map, the only thing we have left to do is what we did here in level 1. I'm going to zoom in. Remember, we used these edges to polish off the outer edges of our bricks. Turn those collisions off so we can see. We don't have any flush or hard edges on the outside edges of any of our bricks. And we did that with the other parts of our tile map. I'll open that up. You see we have down here, we have our left side, the middle part, and then, or actually I think that's the right side, and then the middle part. And these go on the outer edge of this main piece. I am going to go through and polish up level 2, and doing so just adds a little bit extra visual appeal to the game. I am not an artist by any stretch of the imagination. That's why the graphics are very basic. If I were to make this into a full-scale marketable game, I would hire an artist that knows what they're doing. Once I get my edges all polished off, then I'll go back through and add our windows like we did in level 1. I'm going to go do that, and I will show you the finished product when I am done. This is what I ended up with. I evened out all of my edges. I added some windows. I have my player placed at the beginning. We got some coins, some spikes, our new button object, and the diamond. In fact, I wanted to play and make sure that that diamond issue was resolved. So I am going to just play this real quick. Make sure our timer stops as soon as we collect the diamond. And it does. Okay. Because it was going about 3 or 4 ticks over before, but now we got it where it is at the right place. Okay. This wraps up creating a second level. You can use these techniques to design your own level, or if you already have your own version of the game going. I hope I was able to inspire a few different ideas. Ladies and gentlemen, we are done. And when I say done, I mean we have completed the project. We have made a level 2. I'm going to close out of some of this and clean up a little. So here it is. From this point forward, all you have to do is create yourself a new level, or take one of the templates and just add to it, and make sure that you're creating a new event sheet with each level that you create, and then you will match that level with its new event sheet. Everything else is in place. You can design 100 levels if you want with what we have here, because we have created all of the aspects of the game, and all you have to do is put your imagination to work. Work for the player or against the player. You can create puzzles out of what we already have going. But everything else is intact. All the code, all the setup, all of our organization, and this project has finally come to a close. I know it's been a long tutorial series. There's been a lot of information covered, but all that information is on this channel for as long as you need it. It's not going anywhere. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask. I will do my best to get an answer to you. So that wraps up this tutorial series. And even though we're done with it, remember to always save.